Okay, sorry, you got my necklace thing.
No, it was
Hi. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Can you see Sean?
I'll copy
Hello.
it and I'll send it to
Oh.
you. Because it's just.
Now, so the live stream should be working. Oh, I hope that's if I go there. And guess what I'm wanting to do?
And I send you.
Is share this screen. I don't, not sure if the GoToMeeting is gonna work. Can you hear me?
Like I was blown away.
Okay, well, what I'm wanting you to do is see the screen. Can you see that where it's all blue? Perfect, that's what we wanted to see. I'm gonna call everybody back. And I started the live stream again, so I wanted to email you guys to say I think we're on. Okay, so if everybody can grab, if folks can grab what they need and bring with and come sit down, we'll get started again, please.
I'm so glad you're here. Yeah. Well, I thought not so much about just touch.
Thanks for your patience.
Oh, everybody just as much but
I just can't believe it. Try and get it done. I don't know. I think I just said that. Eventually they'll be back. Oh, hi. Okay. Yes. And then they did the smash and the
Don't use it and let me just send that out like me. Yeah, or an interview. I usually speak about
Okay. Come before you miss the little movie. The movie is about to begin. The movie is about to begin. They're not listening to you. So, let me do you as
Okay.
But I didn't. I just heard
They want us to stop. Here's the last one. Yes.
Actually, once we put on GoToMeeting, I just stretch this.
Oh, yeah. That's Italian.
Right now, I just go to GoToMeeting. Oh, I think what's happening is that I'm trying to show a little video, and I think the GoToMeeting is interfering.
I lived on the street from
Yeah. And then I'm just gonna stop GoTo for like 1 minute, and then we'll log it on again. Okay, sorry about that. Then I'll send you.
I don't know what mine will be anyway. Are you on your
Yeah, I put it right to the desktop, and I just showed it. It was fine. Showed the interpreter to me. You were watching. Yeah.
I don't know if
Okay.
So
So I did have the video all ready. I get you all excited that we're gonna watch a video from John Warren. Oh, she did it. Oh. Tamara, what Magnus up to Magnus.
It was
Okay, so welcome back. I hope the go-to meeting's still there, maybe, but we'll watch it and then we'll go back to go-to meeting.
I think it says there's
Yeah.
5.
Okay, perfect. Good. All right, welcome back. The agenda right now is, I'm gonna introduce you to John Warren. I just met him yesterday. And so he is the new ASL specialist for POP DHH. And so I started off by saying, you know, I apologize, my signing skills are not the greatest. And he kind of said, ooh, I apologize, my voicing skills are not the greatest. So I just thought, okay, this is a good guy. So he's done a little video intro. We were hoping he might have been able to join us for a little bit this morning or this afternoon. So I'm hoping maybe next year, if we do this next year, that maybe we can scoop him for an activity or two. But for right now, we just have the intro, and we'll just go from there. Okay. Oh, sorry. Can you stop for a second? I need the voice. So sorry. Yeah, you can't hold it. What am I? Man. Okay, I need a new brain. Okay.
Hello, I'm John Warren. That's my name sign. Just want to introduce myself. I work as an ASL specialist with POP DHH here. And my responsibilities include outreach all over the province and also working one-on-one to support students. Looking at their vocabulary, looking at their ASL, looking at their literacy levels, and developing their socials language. So that is my job, is to evaluate and report back to POP DHH about different students' language. Prior to this position, I retired from Vancouver Community College, where I worked for many years, and then briefly worked in Saskatoon for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services in Saskatchewan there. And that involved a lot of travel and outreach as well, all across Saskatchewan. And especially a focus on working with Indigenous deaf and hard of hearing youth with their equivalent of POP DHH. And after a brief stint there, I moved back to British Columbia and have been working with the team. So it's very nice to meet you all. And goodbye, I guess.
So, and I don't know, maybe,
Yes, I'm back.
oh, yes. And so, actually, I'm gonna ask Joanna, do you mind to come up where you were gonna maybe show us some of that type of, and then maybe while I chat, we need to kind of set up on the internet. How do I gotta get the internet rolling here again. Oh, there we go. I'll just do Safari. So, in order to access John, there are forms to be filled out. Tamara might be able to address that when she gets the floor. You know, so there would be that form request. Your teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing would kind of be that go-to person to do that paperwork, to then hand it in to outreach. So Tamara can correct me later if I'm wrong. And so for this next little piece before Tamara joins us, again, I had mentioned earlier, you know, like this is a day for you guys, and I had name tags, and that's why it's some other markers, and interpreters were going to be blue, and classroom EAs and itinerant, they were going to be red, and interveners were going to be black, and then BCSD, I had another marker, a green. It all fell to the side, but it's nice to see everybody chatting and mingling, and I guess that is the goal. When Joanna from Delta kind of signed up, I noticed her caption on the bottom, classroom classroom transcriber. So I kind of went, oh, what is that? And would you be interested in sharing just a short little blurb? And so I thanked Joanna because she, you know, because I thought, myself, I've never really watched a type well transcribing going on. I've never had a student in all my years as a teacher of the deaf. We never had that set up. So I thought that would probably be interesting to at least one person here. So she was going to just, looks like she has a short little handout for you guys. And then you needed internet, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, so the internet's right there all ready for you to set up.
Oh, no, I've got it.
Oh, but onto the screen.
Oh, I don't have a cable.
Oh, can we just cable you from here?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. So if it doesn't work that way, then we'll just see how that all rolls. But the hope was maybe we could be up on the screen. So again, I'm thinking the live folks, I might want to go a little closer, just in case it works up. Do you have a dongle that just goes from here? Oh, you're gonna just like
No,
from there?
I have no dongles.
Okay, but can I just hook you up from here?
I don't know.
I think so. I think so.
On the handout, people can link in on their own devices.
Oh, okay, sorry. So, those that are live streaming, can I get one of the handouts? Can I just read one real quick?
Sorry.
Okay, so those that are live streaming, oh, there you go. If you type in west.typewell, so west like north, east, west, W-E-S-T, period, typewell, period, .com, I guess, not period, .com, /, and then here we go with GMPLOOCD. So I'll say that one more time. I don't know if you can read it backwards. So if you can log on to whatever device you have, http:// west.typewell.com, and then after that /GMPLOOCD. Okay, so if here, excellent. So if you're logging on, and for the live streamers, you can see this is what the student would have in front of them. Excellent. This is great, Joanna. So, and I thank Joanna, and when she volunteered to do that, and like, I just want to put it up there again. Is there someone else that might be interested in sharing something that they're doing? Because I think, like I'm quite interested in seeing a type well fully, but there's other things that you all do, and we kind of, this afternoon, we really are going to kind of talk more around what are some of the things you do want for next year. Is this something we should do? Is this something we should continue? And what are kind of some of the topics that you would like kind of covered? The budget is minimal, but it's, you know, it's doable. And I think over the last 3 years, we've been able to get some pretty phenomenal speakers and sharing of information. So now, if I look back here, I'll let Joanna do the talking because now I better be quiet. Did you need me to keep yammering? Okay, so here, let me give you this. So this is Joanna from Delta.
So hi, I am from the Delta School District, and I am a type will transcriber. It took me about 3 months to do the program, and it's an online program based out of Arizona. I was going to let you link in on your own device. Essentially, this is for high school students. What we try to do in Delta is we introduce transcribing to grade 7s when they're transitioning to high school. And in high school, we use Typewell for the academic classes and programs. So I can also do chemistry, physics, as well as more verbal classes such as social studies or English. And as was mentioned earlier, I can sit anywhere in the classroom. I don't have to sit next to the student. Some students have their own laptops, other students just use this iPad where it's an internet link and they can see exactly what I type. I was going to bring up on my screen an example of a transcription that I did the other day. So you can see I type everything. If the bell rings, I type bell rings. If something falls, I type that something fell. If someone makes a really crude joke, I type everything, all the words, because the whole idea is access to information. And if the rest of the class heard the inappropriate comment at the back of the class, our student needs to hear that too. Because as Piper was saying in terms of transitioning to post-secondary, the social aspect is also very important. Yes, the academic aspect is good, and we make sure that all of our kids that are in grade 11 and 12 do have some transcribing exposure, so that when they do go to post-secondary, they can say, yes, I have this. They can sign up for it and they can get it. But the social aspect of transcribing is amazing, and that's where you get the buy-in from the students that go, oh, I don't want another device on my desk, I hate the FM, I hate the everything. But then when they see me type what the guy behind them said about the girl on the other side of the room and what she did the other day, oh yeah, they want to read everything that's on that screen. And the student also has the opportunity on the top part of the iPad to respond to me and ask me a question. What did he say? I don't have any students that need me to voice for them, but as a transcriber, yes, if the student typed me a question and said, I don't understand, I'm the student's voice and I put up my hand and I would say, I don't understand, Mr. Smith, can you please review A and B again? Whatever the student would say, I would say. I don't put words in their mouth. I am just another voice for them to use. And the transcribing, yes, I type all bad words, I type all the sound effects, all that. But the transcript that the student gets at the end of the day, names are taken out, and only the actual course content is left in, because a lot of our teachers are very concerned about privacy and limitations on what they say and how it's shared. The students are not supposed to share these transcripts. Their friends think, wow, you got all the notes, can I just use your notes? So in a way, the transcribing can actually make that student very popular, because the other kids want to see what's on the screen there. Oh yeah, oh I didn't get that. Or he said that, I didn't know that. So it is a very good outlet, and we're very lucky to have that in Delta, and I go everywhere in Delta, because I'm the only one. My associate Kim Benek also does computer support with the kids, but we also use Google Docs, where the student can share the document in real time. And that's another device that we've been experimenting with so that they do have access to information. So I'm going to give this back because I'm going to bring up on my screen a transcript that I took the other day from a social justice class, a grade 12 social justice.
While you're bringing that up, I think what I liked too is it's giving them that exposure. So here I've been a teacher for the deaf for a few years, and I've never given any of my students that exposure. So
Now, would you also have an interpreter plus someone doing this, or is it one or the other?
the question was the interpreter, one or the other, and
Actually, in some classes, there is also the interpreter and myself, because the interpreter often, well, doing sign language, needs to walk around the class as well to assist the children, and I can't do that. I just have to stay in one spot and type. So there is, when the students are working, maybe the teacher isn't talking, but the other EA does need to communicate with the students, so they are more mobile around the class. But that's not always the case. Yep, often it's just me.
How many people do your job in the around?
In the province of BC,
Yeah.
I do know BCIT offers transcribing, Glengarra and UBC. In the secondary school system, there is one in Maple Ridge, there's myself, and one in Victoria. So outside of post-secondary, there's only 3.
So is it hard to find someone for a student, for like a full-time, going to your all the classes?
Yes, because I have to drive everywhere. So I would, for example, I support in 4 different schools. On every other day, I have to drive to Powassan, and then I have to drive back to North Delta for the afternoon, and so I'm spread a little thin in that respect, yes.
What happens if kids don't have you?
Well, we try and make sure that by grade 12, all the students that are going to post-secondary had some exposure to me. So maybe I'll be in their class from May to June. So there might be some switch up later in the year.
Yeah, a lot of good information, good questions. Yeah.
So just to clarify for Johanna, when you asked if there was an interpreter in the class,
The question of
Typically-
interpreter in the class.
typically not an interpreter, but a signing EA.
Assigning EA, no.
So different, a little bit different. Because I don't, Johanna, do we, I don't think
We
we
do
have
not have an
interpreters. We
interpreter.
don't have any interpreters currently,
No.
in the district.
So no interpreters, registered
So-
qualified interpreters.
Signed EA.
I have a question as
I just
well.
have an interpreter with me, so I was wondering.
Okay, so Marilyn here has a question.
I have a question about the signing EA. Is the signing EA standing at the front of the room, signing what the teacher is saying, and then walks around to help students?
No. So if I could just repeat the question. So Mary's question was, is the signing EA standing next to the teacher and then they
Because
walk
this
around?
woman is an interpreter, and she's doing an interpreter's job. And all school districts have positions for interpreters. We EAs need to know that can sign. Be careful, because you can have a grievance slapped on you if you are doing what this woman is doing in the front of the classroom, and you are not a qualified interpreter in the interpreter position. So I'm just saying that from a union perspective. Do not get yourself in a grievance situation because you're trying to do something kind, because it's actually not. So if you're assigning EA and you're going around helping students after, then that is assigning EA, but this is not assigning EA.
And could everyone hear Marilee in the sense? So it was interesting because had we had more time, I actually had kind of set up an interpreter who was gonna come up, and we just don't have time today. So maybe we'll table that for next year, because that is a very important point.
Very
Is-
important.
And school districts, we are trying to ensure that we have registered, qualified interpreters with proper training.
But EAs need to understand
Yes, and that's that
this
whole
is an
understanding.
interpreter's role.
Yes.
What you're seeing here.
Yes,
That
right
is
beside
not our
Yeah.
role as signing EAs. That's what you will be briefed for.
Yeah, so already I kind of see that maybe that's something we table for next year.
Yeah,
and as such,
definitely.
Yeah, yeah, one more question?
The opposite side of that coin, we have interpreters that, because they're in a classroom that may not have an EA in that room, are actually now functioning a lot like EAs. They're explaining the work to the student as opposed to just interpreting the teacher's explanation.
Yeah, oh, and I forgot about you live streamers, sorry, they're not hearing you. That's why I was trying to repeat, and then I got, Marilee had more to say. But in the sense is, I think we'll table that, and we really need to educate, don't we? We need to educate classroom teachers, we need to educate administrators, and everyone there about what is, what are the roles, and we gotta keep working on that. Yeah, so, if right now, okay, good, look, I got it up, good for me. So, that then, I guess, is exactly then what the student would see. You know, teachers talking, and I won't say any swear words though. I've done enough swearing this morning already. I actually did pretty good.
You did great.
I
think one other thing to note
Oh, yes.
is this is,
One other thing to know?
Yeah, one other thing is, this is not CART. This is meaning for meaning. So often, especially in the classroom situation, the teacher will say, okay, everyone, let's get out our textbooks, and I want you to, well, before we do that, no, okay, let's take attendance. Well, who's here? Well, get out your textbooks anyway. Get out your textbooks while I'm gonna get my computer ready and take attendance. So in a CART situation, you would type all of that. But what I do is I wait a little bit. So there's about a 10-second delay. And then I put exactly what the other kids are doing on the screen instead of just typing absolutely everything the teacher says, because often it's not necessary to get the meaning across.
again, another really good point, you know, there are the differences between CART and type well, and you need to be trained to type well in order to do it. I know I've heard of a, you know, kind of a, trying to do their own kind of type of type well. And in some ways, you know, does that help that student? But let's try and kind of get that information out there that there is training for that. I don't know, how expensive was it?
The school or district will pay.
Oh, yeah, so.
So if you can type 85 words a minute, you can take the online test and see if Typewell will accept you. Then if they do, you go to your school district and say, hey, I can do this. It costs, I don't know, $350. It's an online course. You do it on your own time. And then it took me 3 months to do it because it's basically learning shorthand. So your standard keyboard is different. When I type the letter J and hit enter, it populates as the word the. When I type the letter X and hit the space bar, it populates as the word and. So you are shorthand typing and then also using absolute substitutions for 6 words.
Oh, cool. Very interesting. I think, now Piper, did you have a little comment to make?
I do.
So I'll let Piper have the floor, and then shortly I'll get Tamara, knowing that she's on in about 5.
A pleasure to meet you. We have much to talk about. I was just going to add, for the post-secondary system, we're just completing a research project actually to address the shortage of typewell transcribers. We're very aware that if students are coming from the secondary system and used to having typewell transcribing, that we want to make sure that the post-secondary system can accommodate those needs. And currently we're at a very desperate shortage of transcribers. Our program, PCAS, does train transcribers. We received some additional funding from our Ministry of Advanced Education. And so one of the things we're very interested in is building the pool of transcribers, because if transcribers could be working in the K-12 system and be trained to do that, they could very easily move into the post-secondary system and work evenings or weekends and so forth. So they would actually be able to build a bit more capacity for a career. Some of what we've understood and heard from transcribers who've left the field,
No, and actually I thought they can't, the live streamers can't see that,
So,
how it's all
letting the
typed.
streamers see what's going on the screen.
Yeah.
Great. So anyway, sorry, I was just going to add to the point that we're looking to build capacity because we are hearing that transcribers are leaving the field in post-secondary anyway because there's not enough full-time work to be a sustainable career. So I do take that comment and certainly take it to heart if that's something that interests you. I know that there's definitely plenty of work. It's not really seen much in the community. Generally, what you'll see in community settings is CART, typically, but if there's greater capacity and we have a larger pool of transcribers who work in typewell, I don't see why that couldn't be another part of freelance work as well.
Excellent. Great. Okay, we'll put you guys back. Sorry. They shake. Doesn't it make you think of Sheldon? Did you ever see that Big Bang where he's... It was the best $50 I ever spent. So, thank you again. And I was pronouncing your name wrong, sorry. I said Joanna, it's Johanna?
Oh, it's okay.
Oh, okay.
I asked to hear you.
Oh, hey, you. Okay, so, and again, I mean, this is beyond what I was expecting for, you know, I thought, well, you know, just 5 minutes, but I think it's brought on some really good dialogue and really good conversation, and I know Piper's very excited. So I'll add this back up for the streamers to get that website better, and so, or actually, once you're done, this isn't gonna be up anyway, is it? Never mind. Doesn't matter if that's up, but you get the gist. But good. So again, for next year, if all goes and we, you know, can maybe, if there's a few that want to help out, do we continue something like that? You know, we'll send a survey out on Monday or Tuesday, you know, get some feedback this afternoon. Some of our conversations are going to be around that. Like, if we do this next year, if we're able to, we'll first make sure that the internet really is working. And I tried, honestly, yesterday, and yeah. So there's always going to be some tech issues. That goes without saying. But Yeah, I think, at this stage, we already have a few different topics to kind of talk about, you know, and kind of make sure we're all well educated around them all. So I'm gonna let Tamara almost take the floor. I saw her, oh, she's chitter-chatting back there. So she's gonna come up from Pop DHH. She wasn't really supposed to be on till 11:30, but she's here right now. So I'll let her kind of get set up. Is that all right that I called you up early? Okay, good. Yeah, okay, so, in the meantime, I'll just kind of, I'm going out to Whip to get the sandwiches. Sorry, live streamers, I can't deliver sandwiches to Prince Rupert or Williams Lake, sorry. But when I do bring them in there, I know there was a few people that were gluten-free or vegan, and so I tried to order that way, Subway sandwiches, you know, enough to kind of wet your whistle. And then, if Tamara's done a few minutes early, I'll, like, as soon as you get started, I'll go and get them, so whenever you're done.
When do you need to?
12:15 is when lunch starts for CADA. So we need to be done around the 12:15. And I had a quick sneak peek at some of Tamara's slides, so it's gonna be fun.
I hope so.
Yeah, so here, let me give you this.
Can I just unplug?
Oh, right, yes.
And then I guess I'll log into the GoTo meeting.
Oh, so we're gonna un-go to and then re-go to.
Maybe keep it on.
Okay. So what we're trying to do here while she's redoing it, so for those that, you know, in the distance, Kelowna, Prince Rupert, Williams Lake, so we've started with the live stream here, but there's no kind of communication with. So Tamara and Alana in their wisdom said, oh, well, if we did GoTo meeting also, then there can be some communication.
What are access needs of the remote sites? Are people all hearing? Do they have interpreters?
Yeah, no, all
All hearing, okay.
all hearing.
I was gonna
I
use
think-
Seating if they needed my speech reading, but I'll just use GoToMeeting. if
Yeah,
they're
we'll just-
okay.
One of the things we asked you to download on your phone, you did get that email about no, okay, good. Because sometimes I think I've sent something, and I've gotten better at going back to see that it actually sent. And I had talked about a peer in, but to be honest, I don't think we're gonna get to that stage, but
That was our contingency plan.
yeah, that was the backup, but you know, I've been using a peer in with a student, I'm since retired from Abbotsford and now I'm consulting, so I see her personally some of the time, and now we do a little bit of online, so we have better connection. And I couldn't believe how easy the appear in kind of works, so we're kind of excited. I'm going to Powell River, and I'm gonna meet up with a grade 2 girl such that we will appear in with my other little student in Abbotsford. So Anna and this other little grade 2 girl, they'll kind of, it's a child-friendly looking Skype. Like it just, and it's so quick and easy. So if we don't get to it, do check it out, appear.in, and it's seamless. Like it worked every time I tried it.
And you don't need to download anything.
And yeah, and that's the thing, you don't need to download anything, and you just kind of.
Easier than FaceTime.
Much easier than FaceTime, and I think clearer than FaceTime. Some hard of hearing individuals have given us that feedback that it is a little easier to speech read, because it just gives you that little bit better clarity and the such. So once we come back at 1, oh, that's a different charger. Once we come back at 1, again, we'll split into different groups. So I am gonna try to do live streaming and GoToMeeting with each of the different groups. So I have another smaller stand that will just kind of be there in the background for any interveners that are in Williams Lake or one of the other places.
Which webcam are you using for this? Like, do I need to sit here for this one?
Yeah, I took the web mine off, I just did share my screen. I'm not sure what they
okay.
saw.
Yeah, no, you're right, that's what I'll do. Yeah,
Okay,
sorry.
okay. So, I mean, part of this day too is kind of learning what's working, what's gonna work. You know, will Moodle work? Will Google Classroom work? Does the live stream work? So we'll get some feedback from those that aren't here. And some of them that aren't here might say, oh, I think I'd rather come because they get great sandwiches. And the such, so hopefully this all, now you're gonna sit right there, Tamara, to start?
Yes, I'll probably stand up, but I need
Oh,
to just.
oh, well, she's still getting ready. This was found
I close it.
in the bathroom? Nobody? I didn't open it yet to see any name, I just thought I'd hold it up. We'll open it later and see how much money there is. And the such, so, like I said, again, Monday or Tuesday, look for, I'll just try and keep it just a short and quick survey, giving you an opportunity to let us know what you think, what we could change, and I think the biggest question is, you know, is this worth your time to come in and all join together?
Which Wi-Fi should I be on? I'm on a Shaw open one, but I guess.
No, and then we gotta go to, guest, SD41 guest. Okay, and then you sign in right here. And then Alana at pop.ca, and then the password is 285156. I guess you guys didn't need to be talking like that, sorry. Okay. So, Alana, do you have any other kind of, like what I had mentioned while Tamara's focusing on that part, when I, like with John, the process now then is that, you know, let's say somebody here says, you know, I'd really like to have some service from, you know, connect with John. So they talk to their teacher of the deaf, who then fills out the appropriate form, to which they should know which form. And it's on, oh, they need the consult form on the webpage. So I think that's the process you'd like people to go through. So if you have an interest where you think, you know, I really need to connect with John. I should mention at this point, under the deaf blind outreach, as interveners, I think at this stage, John is just available to deaf and hard of hearing students, if I'm clear on that. Just don't want to lead it straight to interveners, because many of our signing kids, so until we know more about that, just so you know, and I'll find out more and just make sure and I'll pass that through Alana Pierce, for the deaf blind students, how that can work. So I think we'll kind of work that through.
We've also had a lot of requests for John, so I
So
think you'll be prioritized because it's attached to a student.
Yeah, so make sure when you're getting your teacher of the deaf to fill out the consultative form that you attach names and needs, kind of that kind of thing.
It needs to be like a referral,
A referral, and I think you called it a consulting form?
request for consultation.
Request for consultation. And, yes, it's all about the right form. Okay, so are you gonna stand, Tamara? Just because here's our Zoom, maybe I'll just zoom you out a little bit, but then they can't see just because I guess what you can't see, but I did send them your PowerPoint. So I think you're better off looking at your own PowerPoint. If you didn't hand it out, if you think you just.
Three handouts.
Three-handed, so, well, I will hand out, and do you mind to hand out one behind me and one right after, are you all right with that?
Can you guys see
You're following, three here, two here, and this is up on the Moodle also. Is there another person here? Yes. This is pretty fancy, all in color.
That's thanks to Ivana. I wasn't gonna print them all, but.
So Ivana's the secretary at Pop. And so we thank her. And if we run out, you can share.
We have a bathroom.
I'm gonna start to spread it out a little bit, so I'm gonna run out of ground. Thank you.
I'm very last minute. I used to be one of those people that was like so inconsiderate to the interpreters to submit last minute, and now I'm one of those people.
I never even thought
So, thank you, Panda Routers.
So the organizer ended my go-to meeting. What is that?
Okay, so, Tamara's just re-signing in the go-to meeting, I guess it timed out.
I think someone else was an organizer and they left.
Oh. Well, Alana signed me in, but maybe when we shut, oh no, should you,
I was just.
you signed up, so. Anyway, for the live streamers, they're live streaming there anyway. No, that's it, so, but they are, again. Oh, you know who I sent it to already? I sent it to the live streamers, they have all this. I'll send out an email after 2 o'clock, and if you didn't get your own copy, you can print your own for later, if that's all right. I can find a card piece and I want it.
So great until it's not. Okay, I think I'm in again. Oh, but everyone else is turned off.
Okay, and I am actually, if that's all right, I'm just gonna see whose name, so you guys is my witness. Maya? Shantaru?
Yeah.
Nia. Here's your money, I didn't take anything out. Promise, as my witnesses.
I think everyone else got booted off when I got booted out.
You know what, I think for, like, yeah.
Are they all on the remote thing?
Yeah, I think when Alana, are you still here, Alana? Because when you put us in, we were all on EA mentoring, or
Then it times out,
they were all on that one.
the internet times out.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was what I was on.
yeah, yeah. So Bridget, can you text me, are you on GoToMeeting? Does it go off? Bridget or Carol or who else is out there? I can't remember names anymore. Yeah. Yeah, so
Is everyone on the stream?
they're on the streamer.
Okay, and they have my hand.
So they have the handouts, and so now you won't really be able to read this very well, so our apologies. Next year.
I'm going to share my screen on GoToMeeting, so you can just go back in and re-log in to GoToMeeting the same way that you did the first time this morning. And then you should be able to see my slides, hopefully. Okay, so today is about auditory access strategies. I work with Terry Maloney, I'm the speech pathologist on our team, and Alana, who's around here somewhere. Today, so auditory access is maximizing residual hearing, and so I apologize to the deaf people in the crowd here. I don't know how applicable this will be to you guys. And if you're working at BCSD, probably there's a lot of good things happening in the classrooms anyways that will be maximizing these things, and probably I've learned them from observing in your classrooms already. So today, I think I'm on the agenda for 45 minutes to an hour, so we'll get through this as quickly as we can so you guys can have some lunch. And just quickly for my own knowledge, who here is currently working with a child who's deaf or hard of hearing? Is everyone? Okay. And who's working in like the K to 3 range? And then kind of intermediate? And then high school? Okay, cool. There's a good variety. And then this, I actually learned from Kirsten at one of her workshops. So I just wanted to run through and say, if I use hearing impaired, can you shoot a spitball at me, or hearing loss? Because I'm a work in progress and I'm still trying trying to change my own vocabulary here. But if I say deaf, I might just mean hard of hearing. So I wanted to quickly introduce the team. I don't have a picture of John because I was going to show the video, but you just saw John, our ASL specialist. Ivana, if you call the office, is who will answer the telephone. Winley is downstairs today. You'll see him. He's very tall. He's wearing a red tie and a white shirt, racing around doing all the tech stuff. Everybody probably knows Terry, and then you've seen Alana flitting about like a hummingbird. She's here, she's there, she's everywhere. We don't need to watch John's video again. So that's already part one. I'm a pretty quick speaker. So I just put this in here in case there's any questions about hearing that come up later, so we can refer back to it. So feel free to jump in, ask questions anytime. This is my little guy. When your dad's an audiologist, you like having your ears lifted. So really quickly, before we get into the strategies, I wanted to talk a little bit about speech acoustics. In your child's folder, if you look in there, there's probably an audiology assessment form. And in there, there'll be a sheet that has a chart that looks like that without the pictures up in the corner. And you'll see X's and O's on it. How many people have seen an audiogram before? Oh, great. So when you look at the audiogram, there's frequency across the top here, and it's arranged like a piano, so low pitch to high pitch. And then the sounds are sort of counterintuitive. So the really quiet sounds are at the bottom, or at the top here. And then the really loud sounds are at the bottom. And it's a logarithmic scale, which means that the sound gets loud very quickly. So every 3 decibels is a doubling of sound. So 3 to 6 is doubling, 6 to 9 is a doubling, so it's not really, it gets loud really, really quickly. The other thing I want you to take a look at is the speech banana. So this blue part here, that's where most of the sound energy for speech sounds are. And you'll notice it's closer to the top where the sounds are more quiet. And then down below you'll see lots of environmental sounds, so things like vehicles, airplanes, vacuum cleaner, all those really loud sounds are much, much louder than the speech sounds. The other thing I wanted to point out is these labels here. So mild, moderate, severe, profound. Who here has heard those labels used about their child's hearing? Okay, perfect. So I wanted to highlight that. Those are arbitrary terms that evil audiologists came up with. So mild just means that when I, as a clinician, am looking at an audiogram, I know that the child's hearing loss is between 20 and 40. Moderate means 40 to 70, and so on. It doesn't mean that the child has a mild hearing loss, is not really impacted by it, or that a child with a moderate hearing loss is only moderately impacted by it. It just means that the sound, where the X's and O's are in that range. So it has nothing to do with how the child's performance is or how they feel about their hearing loss. Are there any questions about that? So my main take home is that every single hearing loss is very significant. Even a mild hearing loss can have a huge impact on a kid if they're not supported properly, if they don't have good role models around identity, and if they don't have good access to sound or good access to language that's meaningful to them. I put up these little random comic-y things just to keep your attention. So in your handouts, you should have one that looks like this. When you go back to the school, if you want to talk with your teacher, the deaf and hard of hearing, or look to the child's folder, you can take the audiogram and transfer it onto that handout that you have, and then you'll have a better idea of what the child is able to hear and what the child might be struggling to hear more. If you put the X's and O's on, it's like a boat. So if the child's X's and O's are along here, they can hear everything below the water. Everything above is going to be harder to hear. And the range right above the X's and O's is going to be what the hearing aids or cochlear implants, if the child has them, will be able to hear. And again, I just want to point out that the environmental sounds, or the sounds that are around us in the environment that aren't talking, are quite a bit louder than the speech sounds. I'm just going to shorten this because I feel like, is that loud enough when it's down here?
No, it's better when it's higher.
Let me shorten it so I don't have to hold on to it. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any questions about that? I don't want to spend too much time on this because that's something your teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing, that's actually a good way for you to make contact with them and start that conversation about what the child you're working with can and cannot hear. So I'm going to start with an activity. I want you to read this poem and then tell me what you think it's about. Any ideas? No? Okay. Now I want, you notice that all of the consonant sounds are blacked out and we can't, so there's no meaning. We don't know what it's about. So I want you to pick a vowel, any vowel. Which vowel should we say? E, U, E. Okay. I want everybody to take a big breath and say E as loudly and as long as you can. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. There's some singers in the crowd. You sound like bumblebees. Nice one. Okay. So now I'm hoping that this exercise will convince you why we shouldn't be talking really loudly to people when they're deaf and hard of hearing. So now I want you to read this poem again, and I want you to, maybe you can read it out like as a chorus. I bet you can do it.
Accidentally stubbed my toes, trapped and fell back to my nose, chipped a tooth, scraped my knee, hurt my head, scraped my shoulder, tweaked my ear, got a bruise on my rear.
Okay, so now which part of speech carries the information, vowels or consonants? Consonants, right. Okay, now I want you to take the sound T, so t. I don't want you to say T, I want you to go t. And I want everyone to make a T sound, the t, as loudly and as long as you can. So now, when we talk to someone who's deaf and hard of hearing like this, all we're doing is we're distorting the natural speech sound by making the vowels longer and louder. And that actually hides and makes the consonant sounds less understandable for the kids. So it's better to use some of the strategies we'll talk about later. So things like slowing your speech rate down, getting closer, managing the environment, all those things to make your acoustic signal or your speech sounds more clear for the kids rather than talking more loudly, because then it just distorts the heck out of it. It's kind of like when you're looking in a funhouse mirror. It's not actually how you look, at least I hope not. And a fun fact is that's how accents actually work. So when you're talking to someone from Scotland or Ireland or Australia, it's the vowels that shift around. Most of the consonants are more or less the same. That's how you can understand each other. There's gonna be trivia. So that's a bit of a conundrum because the consonants are the most important parts of speech, but they're the quietest and shortest parts of speech. So what can we do? This is my brother. I jacked that and I texted back to him when he freaks me out. It makes me laugh. So I want you to read this really quickly, and then I'll put another one up for cochlear implants. I forgot to ask, does anyone have a student with cochlear implants? Has everybody read what hearing aids can't do? They're more or less the same, so I'll just put advance it. So what have we noticed about what the hearing devices can't do for the kids? What they cannot do?
Restore hearing.
So it can't really compensate for listening over long distances. It can't compensate for listening to distorted sounds. And it can't compensate for listening in background noise very well. They are getting better, but it's still not a perfect algorithm there. Now this chart, I'm gonna need a volunteer. Did anyone download the sound level meter app that we emailed?
I gotta go in right now, I was just
Oh, okay.
checking, yeah.
Can I get you to stand up? And while I'm talking about this slide, can you put the mic to that, like at my mouth? And then you can just shout out over me how loud I'm being, because I should be like in the 70 to 80 range if I'm lecturing. Is that about right? 60 or 70, okay. Now go like maybe 3 feet away, and then you'll see, so that's where this kid is here, so it's dropped.
61, 59.
So remember, every 3 decibels is a doubling of sound, so I'm being cut in half a couple of times because we've gone down like 10 decibels. And then if you go 6 feet away, that's way down here. What's the ambient sound in here? If I stop talking for a second, what does it say?
44.
44. So this is actually a pretty quiet room. An average classroom that's pretty quiet without any kids talking is going to be about 50. So you think there's a fan going, there's this going, and that's just like sort of the ambient background noise. And am I even picking it up?
It's 53.
53, so that's quite a significant drop, because that was like 60 something.
Yeah, it bounced around, so.
So that's been, if I've gone down 10 decibels, which it looks like that was 10 to 15, that's 5 times I've cut my sound in half. And this is a pretty quiet room, because you guys have pretty good executive function, you're sitting very quietly. You probably have to sleep, so you're not really like rustling around. So if you were a bunch of like kindergartners that were full of beans, there would be a lot more background noise. Do you guys want to just shuffle your feet around for a second? What does the sound go to? 60? So if the sound is 60 and at my voice it's 60, or at my mouth it's 60, by the time you're across the room, the background noise is actually going to be louder than my voice, right? Does that make sense to everyone? So this is a figure from a study that was done with kids who have no hearing differences, and their word recognition was only 40%. They were missing more than half of what the teacher was saying when they were about 4 or 5 feet from the teacher in a classroom that was this loud.
These are hearing children.
Yeah. So you think a child with a hearing difference wearing hearing aids is going to be missing even more than that, probably. So this is just another way to sort of conceptualize that with that phenomenon of, thank you for your help, by the way. That phenomenon of just sound energy dissipating really quickly over listening. In early intervention, we call it a listening bubble. So you'll notice that the bubble is much larger for this little girl. You see the blue ring on the outside. When she has hearing aids on and when it's quiet, because there's no competition for the speech signal or the sound that she's trying to listen to. As soon as you introduce background noise and there's competition, you need to get much closer to that child in order for the speech sounds to be louder than the background noise. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. I'm gonna need some volunteers. Maybe like, we don't have very much space, maybe like 5 volunteers. I'm gonna need you to take a set of earplugs. So we got one.
Do I have to stay up here?
Yeah.
Oh. I'm a pro.
Does everybody know how to put earplugs in properly? You reach around, like how she's doing it with your opposite hand. You pull on the pinna, pull it up and back, squish it in, and then you let it go, and then it locks it in there. Does everybody have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Okay. Someone spread these out all over the floor in any pattern. And I'm going to so we're gonna play a game, and I want you guys to observe what is happening over here. Should we move the anyone watch Big Bang Theory? This reminds me of when Sheldon. Okay, so we're gonna play a bit of a game. You'll notice that my lovely assistant here put some shapes all over the floor. So we're just gonna watch what they're doing. Does anyone else have the noise level meter downloaded? Do you want to come and measure here how loud it is, and then maybe across the room where they are, how loud it is? Okay, so we're at 70-ish here, and then across the room. So we're down 10 over there. And again, this is a pretty quiet classroom. All right, how's that feel?
Was the last one freeze or green? Oh, okay.
Okay, who was on the guitar? It says if you're on a guitar, you win.
Oh, I didn't even try.
All right, thank you guys. You can sit down. You can keep the earplugs on in the back. All right, so hopefully this will help you guys keep in mind why having auditory access might be important in a classroom. So before we start brainstorming how the observations, for those of you who are out here, maybe we'll talk about how it felt, and then we'll ask the crowd how it looked. Let me see if I can get this off so that you guys can use the mic. Okay, I'll start over here. How did that feel for you?
My brain, I was really having to, like, it's hurting because I was really straining to listen, like it's.
So that was a tough couple minutes for you.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I was very confused because I couldn't hear and I couldn't really see the interpreter very well. So I was like, where am I supposed to go? So,
What did you do?
well, the first one I went to the purple because I saw everyone standing on purple, but after that I was lost.
Who else was up there? You were up here.
Right. I found that at first, I didn't realize like the start cue, and then once people started moving, I'm like, okay, I need to notice what other environmental cues there are here.
I could make out like one or two words every now and then, but I could really hear the music and the pings.
Yeah.
So eventually I just wanted to dance.
I felt very lost, and it wasn't inclusive for me. I didn't feel like I was part of the group, and I'm not much on following my environment unless I can hear it.
So she felt lost. She didn't feel like she was part of a group. She didn't feel like it was inclusive for her. Am I capturing what you said roughly? Oh, yeah. Turn Sheldon Cooper back. Okay, I got an extreme close-up of my face. Okay, and how did that look from everyone else's perspective? What did you notice about the kids? I shouldn't have taken this off.
When you weren't talking, I looked at my phone again and it was about 46, so it was significantly lower than the girl with the phone over closer to you by the phone. And I noticed a lot of the
Any other observations from the crowd? No? Okay. So I noticed that when I was blabbing and talking about getting Carolyn to come over with her phone, people were like shooting daggers at me, like, shut your mouth, I can't hear the instructions. Basically, these are all the things that previous groups that I've done this activity with have come up with, and I think most of those I observed, you guys looked kind of panicked, kind of tired. I deliberately didn't really tell you when it was going to start because I feel like that's the experience of a lot of kids in the classroom. Is there anything to add to my list here? Nothing? Okay. So in your package of handouts, there's this sheet. When you get back to your classroom, you can kind of do a self-assessment, and I think this is well within your scope in the classroom to help the teacher be aware of the sounds in the classroom and how they can be managed. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the strategies for managing the sounds. Who here is in a good acoustic environment in their classroom? You're in a pretty, are you at BCSD?
No,
No. Oh, what school are you at?
I'm in elementary school, Bear Creek.
Oh, nice. Anybody in
But
a,
I'm also from Bear Creek and I have the exact opposite end of that spectrum.
Yeah.
So it's not the school, it's the teacher.
the teacher?
I think mine's good, but we've got like, balls on our chairs and we've got carpet and the teacher sets the lights low, so it's always calm and.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think hopefully you guys will have the sound level meter downloaded and you can kind of do similar things to what I was doing, getting you guys to do, because I think teachers aren't really aware of how something like this, for example, is making so much noise. And if I didn't have an FM system on, it's like in direct competition with my voice right in front of all of you. So when you're going through your day, which environments are the worst for your kids? You can just shout them out. Gym class. Okay, so that's the reason why gym class is the absolute worst is because the sound just bounces off. There's nothing to absorb any of the sound energy. And then the sounds bouncing causes an echo, which also bounces. So not only is it really loud, but it's creating lots of copies of the same sound. And now you guys all have adult brains with lots of practice listening, and so your brain goes, oh, I don't need to listen to that copy of that sound. I've already received that message, and it cancels it out. If you have hearing aids on, all it does is really distort the message that you're getting, because your hearing aids aren't smart like your brain, and they don't cancel that message out. So it just sounds like garbage coming in, and it would be the same with a cochlear implant as well. I'm getting some nods. Is that how the gym sounds to you? Yeah. So in a classroom that has carpeting, maybe fabric drapes, there's a bit of the soft material will absorb some of the sound energy. So even though it's bouncing around a little bit, some of that sound energy is getting soaked up or attenuated. And so the echoes coming off are not as loud, and then it doesn't cause multiple copies of the same sound coming out. So like in here, it's pretty good because they've got the acoustic tiling on the ceiling, we've got the carpeting, they kind of set it up like a little pod. So even though there's hard surfaces, a lot of the sound energy is getting sucked up by the stuff in the room and by us as well. And then if you've ever been like in a concert, you know when you walk into a concert hall and it has that weird, like, it almost sounds like a dead sound? That's when they've done like special engineering to suck all the sound, all the different copies of the sound out. And so it also almost sounds unnatural at first when you walk into that environment. So I would say probably most classrooms are somewhere on this continuum. They'd probably be closer to the gymnasium end of things because they've ripped carpets out of most places and all that stuff. And tack boards, you're not allowed to put paper on tack boards anymore. All these things absorb sound, but they also cause allergies. So you've got a trade-off here. But there are other things you can do to limit noise in the classroom, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So why should we limit background noise? Because when you're listening to background noise, it's one more thing that your brain has to keep track of. And so I think we all can relate to this little image here. When you're driving and you're looking for somewhere new, and then even if it's a song you really love that you're familiar with, you will automatically turn your radio off because you need to see better. And so we can do that for our kids by managing the environment a little bit. And I put this slide in here. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, that app. So the organization that put the app out, they're sort of like WCB in the United States. So they're more concerned about hearing loss due to like noise exposure at work or whatever. So the bottom part, you don't need to worry about that. It's just the numbers at the top that you can take a look at when you're doing these activities with your, in the classroom, trying to figure out ways to make it more quiet for your student. Often in IEPs, there's always a goal. It seems to be like preferential seating, and they have the kids sitting right at the front, in front of the teacher. And that's not always the most ideal location because you need to keep into consideration other sources of noise. So if the classroom door is right here, or you've got a kid that has ADHD and is moving around constantly, or there's a fan right over where the child is sitting, that might not be the best place for them. And we also have to think about lighting. So if there's a really sunny window, you don't want to, like, I don't want to be standing in front of a sunny window talking to the classroom because then I'm backlit. So you need to sort of be mindful of all these things and keep track of where sources of noise are and have the student close to the teacher but far from other sources of noise. So if there's, I don't know why there's always like fish tanks and guinea pigs in classrooms. You want the student sitting across the room from that, closest to the teacher. So you can help with sort of organizing the space a little bit to make it a bit friendlier for listening. The other thing is keeping doors and windows closed. Those are big sources of noise. And I know some schools don't like you to close the door, but you could get your teacher of the deaf involved and advocate for a door with a window if that's the case. I mean, if there's an EA in the classroom, I don't know why there would be objections to the door being closed. There's no window, but, and if you can collect the data using your sound level meter, then that can build a strong case for keeping the door closed or getting a door with a window in it. Does anyone have that issue where the school wants to leave the doors open? Okay, I've only been in a couple of schools where they've had that, and I thought it was kind of.
Once you explain it, it happened to me last year, and I just explained it, and they were okay with it.
All right, so I thought we could take a second and brainstorm all of the things in classrooms that make noise and drive you crazy. This is my son. He used to make funny faces. Now he does. So what are sources of noise in your classroom that you can think of right now?
We're in a really old high school, and they've got these great big fans for like the heating and air conditioning.
Okay, so
systems,
big
and
fans for heating and air conditioning, and there's no way to get away from them. Perfect.
Kindergarten class, and there's a bathroom in it, of course, and
Yeah,
the
the
kids
bathroom
leave
and
the
the
light
kindergarten
fan on.
and the fan.
I date.
Students in general.
Students in general. Kids are the worst. Okay.
Multiple support staff dealing with multiple children with multiple issues.
Multiple support staff dealing with multiple children, dealing with multiple issues.
Yes.
I'm at a brand new school.
Yeah.
Opposite to a very old school. We have construction happening. And they're
Construction in
really
the new
into the
school.
ground still and against the wall.
Okay.
So, most times it just happens with this.
Okay.
Grass maintenance, getting the lawns
grass.
being mowed and weed whackers right up against the windows if they're trying to keep it hot. Even the fumes as well.
Yeah. Grass maintenance and the smell of grass.
Located in a center hub where everybody's moving.
Located in a center hub where everyone's moving. Anything else?
Under the definition of students, we've got the tapping of pencils, the shuffling of feet,
Yeah.
the opening and closing books, the conversations going on when the teacher's talking.
Yes, so just students make a lot of noise themselves.
Our school is trying to be more innovative with desk setup. So we've got new chairs that are on exercise balls, and so the kids are actually bouncing.
Exercise balls, chairs,
Spinning.
that kids are bouncing and spinning and falling. And laughing, yes. Sorry, I should be passing this around. Or being yeah.
Then you've got the PA announcements.
Oh, yeah,
Spontaneous, like,
yeah,
interruptions.
that's true, yeah. Which are always very meaningful for our kids. The bell ringing, yeah. So, how can we troubleshoot some of these things? So there's things like the HVAC in the room. So I can hear the HVAC sounds like it's coming from over here. We can't turn it off, but how could we maybe organize the space to make sure that it's accessible for the kids in the classroom?
They're not sitting under it?
I heard someone say something.
They're not sitting under it?
Yeah, so make sure the kid isn't sitting under it. What were some of the other things? Noise of the kids. So when are kids most active?
Recess and lunch?
Recess and lunch, like right
Pretty much
before.
all the time.
All the time?
Getting them to be quiet is a challenge on a daily basis.
Yes. But, so if you're gonna be working on something like a reading activity, maybe planning that at a time when they're most likely to be maybe slightly less restless? Maybe not at like 2:30 in the afternoon? I don't know. It would depend on your classroom, right? For things like lawn maintenance, you can definitely get a schedule for that and work around that to make sure, no.
We're the biggest impatient for that recess, so.
When they come.
When they come.
When they come, so it's hard to plan for that.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any other ideas?
I think we mentioned is like when I'm in intermediate a lot and they do a lot of like where the
Okay, let me
kids,
come over.
sorry, where the kids are like, okay, turn and talk to each other, those kinds of things, or do a project together in the next 20 minutes, whatever. I usually try to get the students that I work with, their groups, to go just have where they can actually listen to me, so they can hear better. But yeah, because all of them are way out.
Does anyone else have anything to add? You guys are pretty knowledgeable with this stuff already, but hopefully if you can,
I was just talking split classes.
Oh, split
So
classes.
you constantly have half the kids coming in and out and switching around. At our school, most
Yeah.
of the classes are split this year. And it's.
What district are you at? Sorry. All right. So somebody mentioned that they have tennis balls on their shoes, or on their
I'm
chairs.
just gonna mention that.
So you can get your teacher, the deaf and hard of hearing, to order these with their magical budget that they seem to have. It's endless. Just keep pushing on it. Don't go to the dollar store and buy tennis balls and cut them. You'll like slice the tendon and it's not worth it. But they make a huge difference in the classroom, just minimizing some of that noise. I know some teachers will put pool noodles around like the desks or the legs of the chairs. So there's a wiggly one in the classroom that always seems to be sliding around. There's always a few of those in every classroom. Who here does equipment checks daily with their students? I like to see those hands up. So your student should be checking their batteries, and an adult with no hearing difference should be doing a listening check of the equipment every single day. Yep.
We have an audiologist that comes around to our classes at PCSD.
Okay.
But I'm just wondering, how young would you teach a child to take the hearing aid in and out so they don't break the little?
So the question is, how young would you start doing this with children? When I worked in early intervention, there were some 2 and 3-year-olds that would help me. Like, I wouldn't necessarily hand it over to them because the batteries are poisonous, but you can definitely help, like hand them the battery. They can put it in a little battery tester and they like to push the button and watch the thing come up. That this is their access to the world around them, so it needs to be functioning. And I'm flogging a dead horse, I know that, because I know you guys have a million things to do in your day. But if you can get the listening checks happening, if the student is like intermediate or high school and you're confident that they're gonna tell you when the equipment is dead or if something's shifted and there's like wax built up and they can't hear as well, then it's not as important. But if your student, if if you don't trust them to tell you, or they're one of those kids that like sneakily opens the battery door or whatever, then checking it is also, and involving them in that check is also part of the self-advocacy piece. So they're taking ownership of their hearing, and they're managing the equipment themselves and handling it. Checks are something that a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing can help you with. And if the child doesn't have a listening check kit at school, talk to your audiologist, get the parent to talk to the audiologist or talk to the teacher of the deaf. It's all marketing material from the hearing aid companies. So to get you another kit doesn't cost anybody anything. And every kid should have one at school in case it breaks down.
Do you know of any program where we can get hearing aid families? And it's very hard to get them. And my kid's from a refugee family, so getting them through her is.
There are sources of funding. Talk to your teacher of the deaf about that, because they'll need to help you apply for that. Do you know who your teacher of the deaf is?
Yeah.
Does anyone's student use an FM system? Okay. Do we want to watch a short video clip about how important FMs are? Yes. Okay.
Guys, welcome back. Monday morning. Hope everybody had a great weekend.
For a child with hearing loss, no matter how good the technology is, their listening will have a damaged auditory system. We need to help them to hear what's happening in the classroom. If they don't hear the teacher, if they don't hear the questions and comments from other kids in the classroom, they're going to miss a significant amount of what happens, and that's not fair to them. We have to remember that classrooms are very noisy places. For a child to hear well in the classroom, we need to give them some special assistance. The first example we're going to show you today is to help you understand what a child with a hearing loss hears in the classroom with an FM system and what he would hear if we didn't turn the FM system on. So let's get it going. The teacher in this classroom has forgotten to put on his FM microphone. Without the microphone turned on, it's almost impossible for a child with a hearing loss to hear clearly. Let's listen to what a child with a hearing loss will hear with the FM unit turned off. Without an FM system on, the child is going to be hearing very muffled speech, or like they're listening from a very great distance. Forgetting to turn on the FM system can happen to anybody, but don't count on the student to tell you if it's not working. Look for visual clues that he's confused, or watch the student trying to look around to see what's happening in the classroom. After a quick check, the teacher can turn on the microphone, check with the student, and make sure that all is working well.
Okay, good.
That gets the student back on track and gets the lesson going in the right direction.
Sound okay now? Okay. So,
Once the FM system is turned on, the student is hearing as if the teacher was standing right next to his ear.
generated a list of which jobs were important to know geography.
Making sure that the FM system works is the responsibility of both the teachers and the students. The students are responsible for advocating for themselves and should be encouraged to say something when the FM system either isn't working or is working poorly. As long as they can hear, they can compete. When there's only one microphone, we know the child will hear the teacher clearly, but they also need to hear the classroom discussion. If there's a pass mic, this microphone can be passed around from student to student, and then all of the students will have the opportunity to speak into the microphone, and the child with the hearing loss will hear everything they're saying. If there isn't a pass mic in the classroom, it's the teacher's responsibility to repeat what's said so that the child with the hearing loss knows what's happening. That means repeating the question if a child asks a question, or repeating what the kids say in their comments. Listen now to how other students' comments sound to a student with a hearing loss, and how disorienting it can be for a child when the teacher forgets to repeat the comments or the questions.
So who's got the next one? Who has another good idea? Aaron, what's your idea? Okay, yeah, it's funny, but that's a good one. Because you're going to be traveling a bunch of different places. You're going to have to know.
By continuing with the class and not repeating the other students' comments, the teacher quickly loses the attention of the child with a hearing loss. Let's hear again just how difficult it is for a child with a hearing loss to hear his classmates.
So let's talk about another one from someone's list on Friday that we had created. Who might have a good idea that we haven't talked about yet? Okay, Aaron, how about one from your list? Okay,
You see
that's
how
a good one.
important it is for the teacher to repeat the comments of other children in the classroom so that the child with a hearing loss can be a fully productive member of the class.
So Aaron just told us rock star. What do you think? Because as a rock star, you're going to be traveling to a bunch of
The
places.
two reenactments you just saw are two simple steps that can happen in every classroom to help children do better. It's something that needs to be part of every educational day. For more information, please email Liz Finnegan at
Okay, so, oh, did I just leave it? Is that on? Yeah. Okay, so how FM systems work is they basically bring the sounds closer. So my mouth is, why am I echoing all this? So my mouth is this far from the microphone, and if it's a personal FM system, then it sounds like I'm actually this far from your head talking. So that's how and why FMs work. Have you guys read the book or heard of the book El Defo? Yeah. It's a good little read. Who here has worn their FM system into the bathroom? Okay. Can someone who's out logged in the remote sites, can you mute your microphone because it's echoing? Do you know how to do that? Okay, someone just muted, that's better. Okay, so we'll just quickly, I know I'm like running out of time. So you, in primary classes, you can limit, like you were saying, like have smaller groups of kids. So if there's like 2 or 3 kids, they're less likely for the sounds to escalate. Even in intermediate and high school classes, using talking sticks, if you don't have an FM pass mic, even just slowing the pace of the conversation down and giving the kid who has a hearing difference an opportunity to track visually who might be talking, that can be really helpful. Have you guys heard of a yacker tracker? No? Okay, so you should order one of these for your classroom. They're really cool. It's basically a sound level meter, and it's like a traffic light. So,
And you know what? I think you can't see it.
Oh,
Because even though you can see it on yours.
hang on. Okay, perfect. So there's a sound level meter, and you can adjust it yourself. So you can make it so that when the classroom sound gets to be a certain level, so say you set it at 65, it would be yellow light, and then if it goes to like 70, it would be red light, and you can make a sound or just flash. But even in kindergarten classrooms, there'll be those 2 little bossy little girls that monitor the class, and the class, it's really helpful. And they're even at BC Family Hearing, when I worked there in the preschool classroom, we had one, and the kids will self-monitor and start adjusting when they get that visual reinforcement. There is an app that you can buy, but I would highly recommend actually buying the physical yacker tracker. It's $100, and I think if you can't convince the teacher to use it for the kids, convince the teacher to use it to protect their own voices, because that's actually a huge concern for teachers is vocal abuse. And if they're not trying to talk over a whole bunch of noise, then it'll protect their voice. You can make noisy toys quieter by using, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Montessori. There's not a lot about Montessori that I really love, but I do like that they have the little mats that kind of confines the space, and the mats themselves absorb a lot of the sound. Markers are really loud, so if you can get a dad in the classroom to make a marker thing like this so that they're not pawing through big bins of dead markers. And using felt pads on the bottom of stuff that might be noisy on the table or floor. I'm gonna leave this freaky little image with you. I hope it traumatizes you like it did me, so that it reminds you that deaf kids need to see you in order to hear you. You're maximizing their sensory input if they can see you, because as you know, their auditory message is incomplete, and their visual information is incomplete, but together it can help them get a full picture. And make sure you get a deaf person's attention before you talk to them. If you're close by, you can touch them. It's not a caress, it's a tap. and you can flick the light if you're across the room. It is also socially acceptable to wave your hand or stomp on the floor to get their attention. Hopefully everybody knows that. Okay, I think the other things are obviously get closer to the child. So if it's in a noisy environment, you want to make sure you're inside their listening bubble. Remember that image at the beginning? So arm's length away is sort of ideal. And then get down to their level, because speech reading someone looking up is really hard. I would know because I'm only 5'1", so everyone is taller than me. Make sure you're not backlit. So that makes a huge difference to their visual access. And make sure that the overhead lights are on. So you mentioned like your teacher keeps the room kind of dim. If you're maximizing visual access, you're gonna want the lights on. So it's gonna be a trade-off, and you're gonna have to do some convincing and explaining there. And just be mindful of the fact that listener fatigue is really real. So make sure you give them lots of breaks. Plan the really academically heavy stuff in the morning, and then work on maybe some other stuff where they can move around like later in the day. Be mindful that fatigue sometimes looks like this, sometimes looks like this, and sometimes looks like this. So just have to really monitor your kid. All right. And as of course, every week is going to be different. Every kid is going to be different. So it's just going to be trial and error and trial and error, and supporting each other in the classroom. Any questions? You guys are great. Thanks for all your participation.
Thank you.
So we moved the lunch out into the hallway because when I see those signs, no food or drink, I think, oh, okay. So
Reminder, the bags are available. They're just over here in the box if you want to put your gatherings in that. And that was Atlantis, yeah. So the food, the sandwiches and the such, and if you have some water left in your bottle, because we're almost out of water bottles, the food is kind of where the deaf students eat their lunch. If you know, as you kind of halfway back down, so heading down the stairs, you'll see the Subway sandwiches.
Where we had it last year?
Yes, where you had it last year, yeah. Yeah, so that same area. If we still come back at 1, then, and then we'll get going sooner opposed to later, that kind of thing, is that all right? And then, thank you, Tamara, thank you. Yeah, and they're engaged, so good, we'll see you back here at 1. Okay, thanks.
This is a win. I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
Okay, I'm gonna say goodbye to these guys.